Well, good morning, everyone. Thomas Montgomery. It's my pleasure to be with you this morning on Tuesday, July 11th, 2023. We get together with our distribution partners and now our interested clients on a daily basis, Mondays through Fridays, to talk about tips, techniques, strategies, share success stories, and support each of you. Today, we're going to roll out a slight tweak that we have made to the credit and funding program, which I think makes it pretty much a no-brainer for most people. So let's go through that, and then we'll field questions, comments, concerns that any of you have. The best way to submit those is on the Q&A, the question and answer function of Zoom, which is essentially like a chat box. All right, so we did send out the agenda to each of you this morning. So if you are on the distribution list as a small business consultant and or state director, you should have received this morning. Our topic today is really announcing the tweak on the credit and funding program. And if you wanted just the bottom line, we're going to make a guarantee of funding within 30 days. And we'll talk about why and how that's possible here in a moment. But that's the most significant change, but we'll build up to that. So as you hopefully know, because each of you have a replicated website, right? If you're a small business consultant, we provide you for free a replicated website, and on your website has the credit and funding program. It is an effective resource to help clients improve credit and get at least $100,000 in funding or financing, depending upon the format of the capital within 30 days. So if we break that down, there's two things that we're doing for the client. We, meaning you and I. What are we doing? We're going to help them improve their credit and get them funding / financing. And that's going to happen within 30 days. So we didn't have that timeline guarantee before. Now we've added that. And we'll talk again in a moment about the reason for that. So you should already have your link to your replicated website. You're open for business. You're able to give that link to individuals. And in fact, towards the conclusion of this morning's Zoom webinar, we're going to go through the step-by-step instructions of the process, which will include directing people to your link. So from your perspective, you're still making the $100 up front on the credit and funding program. You're still making 3% of the client's capital raise. Of course, if we're guaranteeing them a minimum of 100,000, 3% of 100,000 is 3,000. Could be more. As we announced yesterday, we want to eliminate upfront expenses from being a barrier of clients enrolling in the credit and funding program. So you can go back and look at yesterday's training of how we're approaching that. So yes, there is a $999.99 refundable setup fee, but we can finance that. So the setup fee exists. The setup fee has not gone away. It's still there. It's in writing. But the issue is we can finance it for them. So understand that specific point. And again, we went into that in detail on yesterday's training. So we want them to be able to see the benefits immediately and pay later. So certainly it is a legal and a very effective program. We have lots of success stories, and we'll start highlighting some of those in the upcoming days. So you all have those for your own reference and to share if you care to. Today's purpose is to explain the implementation process. In this yellow highlighted area, this was 2 points yesterday, and a couple of you gave us feedback, and so we've expanded it to 3. So here's our guiding principle with the credit and funding program. Number 1, most people don't want to have any upfront expense. And that could be either they don't want the risk, or they just don't have the money, regardless. And so we can get around that now with the credit and funding program. They want results fast. And so that's the new element. We decided we're going to put our money where our mouth is and then guarantee them at least 100,000 in 30 days. So that's a significant advancement. And I think that's going to encourage more clients to participate. And then again, they want to see benefits first and pay later. So these are the kind of the three guiding principles of this revised model of the credit and funding program. Next, let's talk about who should enroll, because anytime you have a resource, it's not going to be the right fit for everyone. So part of the goal is to understand, who is this for? Who could benefit from the credit and funding program? The nice thing is it's real simple to qualify someone. We're looking for people that want better credit and 100,000 in 30 days. If they don't want those two things, they shouldn't enroll in the credit and funding program. Because if they just want funding and they don't need better credit, they could go do our access to capital program, as you're aware of, and it doesn't address credit, not in the same way, not so explicitly. So pretty easy qualification. Are you looking for better credit? Now we'll go into how that happens. We don't want that to be vague and generic and seem too good to be true. So we'll get into that in a moment. But also the $100,000 in the 30 days is the new performance metric that wasn't there before. All right, so let's go through the implementation process. So let me scroll on down here. So the implementation process. Now, you don't have to do it this way, but this is best practice. We've had a chance to visit with many of you and interview many of you and determine what's working and what's not. So here's the best practice on the front end. So ideally, when you're on the phone with the prospect, text them your link to your replicated site. We talked about this in yesterday's training as well. So to just send them your link is passive. To email them your link is hopeful that they'll receive it and do anything with it. But if you have them on the phone, text it to them right then. Do you have to do it this way? No, but it's best practice. So again, you should have your link to your free replicated website. If you don't, get with us and we'll resolve that, but you should have that. So step one is, while on the phone with them. Well, why would you want to be on the phone with them? Well, you don't have to be, and some of you just want to take more of a passive approach, but a lot of times they would like to talk to someone. They'd like to hear that there's a real person, and you're essentially brokering the deal, right? That's why you're getting paid $100 up front. Should take you, 15 minutes, so that's the equivalent of about $400 an hour, and then you're getting paid off the client's capital raise. So do you have to get on the phone with them? No, but best practice is be on the phone with them, and at that time, text them the link to your replicated website. Now, we'd like you to remember, on your replicated website, there is a 5-minute video that explains the credit and funding program. So number one, if you've not watched it, you probably should. And secondly, it's available there. So when you have sent the client the text to your replicated website, if need be, you could direct them towards that video, let them watch that video, and you be online with them. That's not going to be the norm. I don't think you'd normally need to do that, but just so you know that that resource is there, that simplifies your involvement. All right, so number one, we want to get them to your replicated site while you're on the phone with them. And you do that by text, not by email. We good so far? That's number one. Step number one, a best practice of the implementation process. Now, number two, you're still on the phone with them. Go ahead and stay on the phone with them and walk through them completing the simple form. Now, the simple form, if you're not familiar with, you probably should go through yourself or at least look at it, but it's real simple. There's two steps. First, it asks for basic lead information. The reason that this is important is it helps with, if the person starts the process but doesn't finish the process, you know that they started the process, and you and we can follow up with them. So it's called a lead form. It's just their first name, last name, phone, and email. Then they hit the next button. There's a little blue bar there, and then they agree to the terms and conditions. And then bam, you've got yourself a client, and now they're guaranteed better credit and $100,000. Sorry about that, in 30 days. So this is how we turn a lead to a client, is by them going to the form on the credit and funding program page of your replicated website. They start by putting their information in, And then it takes them to the next step to agree to the terms and conditions. So you don't have to push them. You don't have to rush them. You don't have to hard sell them. You don't have to try to close them. Just walk them through the steps. Most people will follow the steps if you're on the phone with them. So we're going to pause for a moment and ask questions. So we've talked about steps 1 and 2. There's 4 steps. The first 2 steps is what you do. We take care of 3 and 4. So what questions do any of you have on numbers 1 and 2? Again, if the issue is you don't know what your link is to your replicated website, we don't need to discuss that now. Just go ahead and send us an email and we can get that to you. But real simple, real simple. Any questions? All right, so now let's talk about where the rubber hits the road. Now we're going to talk about the onboarding process and the implementation, because that's where this becomes reality. This is why it's not too good to be true. So once you have done your 2 steps, then we're going to onboard the client. We're going to send them an onboarding Adobe. That's going to, amongst other things, orient them and onboard them, I guess is a good description, but also it's going to ask them for an authorization for a soft credit pull. That soft credit pull is from Experian only, and it doesn't, a soft pull means no hard inquiry, no impact to their credit score. We need that as early as possible in the implementation process, because we need to know what negative items need to be addressed and are they a good candidate to add positive. Because when we go back to when we talked about better credit is a simple formula. In general, how do you get better credit? You remove negative items and you add positive credit. That's the formula. How do you get better credit? Remove negative, add positive. Now, does everyone need removal of negative? No. Does everyone need the addition of positive? No. But that's the general presumption that we're going into, but we're going to validate it here. And then, of course, what do we do within the credit and funding program? Without any cost to them, then we'll help them remove the negative, and then we'll direct them in adding positive trade lines. So they're going to get an Adobe, an implementation. It's going to, amongst other things, it's going to ask them to authorize a soft credit pull, so we can do that analysis quickly. And it's also going to ask them to pay the $999.99 refundable setup fee. I told you it's called $1,000. There is $1,000 refundable setup fee. However, you might say, well, Tom, you said there's no upfront cost. That's exactly right. If they don't want to pay that upfront, so it's their option, then they can request financing so they don't have an upfront expense. In other words, we go look for financing offers for them through the external marketplace to get funding for them. We can guarantee that they'll get funding for this. Now, they might get funding offers that are a lot more than the $999.99. Everyone will get at least a funding offer for that amount. We don't know how much they're going to get approved for with funding offers, what the terms will be, the interest rates. We wouldn't know that until they request financing, and then they get financed. It's just like buying a car, right? You could go into the car dealership, and are they going to sell you a car if you want to buy a car? Sure. Is there a cost to buy that car? Of course. Do you have to pay anything up front? No. You can finance it and walk out of the dealership with a brand new $50,000, $100,000, $250,000 car with no out-of-pocket expense. Now, does that mean you still don't have to pay for it? Of course they have to pay for it, but we're eliminating the upfront expense, because what we've learned is most people don't want to have an upfront expense, but don't confuse no upfront expense with free, because we're not saying that you can get a car for free. We're not saying the credit and funding program is free. It's not free, but we can avoid any upfront expense. And with the average American's psyche, they are willing to kick the can down the road. They'll pay for it later. They just don't want to pay for it now. So we're meeting that psychological need. Okay, so let's go back to it. So once you have them on the phone, you text them, you get them enrolled, we onboard, we send them the onboarding Adobe, requests the credit pull, gives them other information on onboarding. It asks them to pay the $9.99 or, hey, let us know if you want financing. So we're not going to make the assumption that they want financing. Some people just pay the $9.99 up front, but it's not bait and switch. If they want financing, we will look for financing offers for them, and we'll guarantee that they'll get at least one financing offer to cover the $9.99. But again, the terms of that financing is based upon third parties. So we can't say what the interest rate would be. Maybe it's 0%, maybe it's not 0%. Maybe it's a 12-month repayment term, maybe it's a 36-month repayment term. It's not going to be a gotcha. It's not going to be like, oh, great, here's financing, it's due in 7 days, a net 7. Nothing like that. But we understand financing's available and guaranteed. Regardless of how bad their credit is, everyone can get financing for at least this amount. Now, they may, in fact, get even more. And you might say, well, why would we want to get them more? Well, remember one of the promises we made? We're going to get you at least $100,000. Let's get started. And then you also might ask, well, wait, why would they want to request financing? Well, we told them we're going to help them get better credit. And you and I have agreed already. What's the formula for better credit? Removing negative, not applicable at this point in the conversation, but adding positive trade lines. That is very applicable, right? So them getting financing for the $9.99 is doing a couple of things. We're getting them their first round of capital, which is awesome. We told them we'd do that, and we're doing it. And then secondly, we're helping them improve their credit by adding a new positive primary trade line. Make sense? Okay, furthermore, if the client wants funding now, and this kind of goes to what we were just talking about, we'll get them funding offers that puts money in their pocket. So our goal is to get their first tranche, their first round of funding in less than a week. Now, I know, we're saying that the full 100,000 will be available to them in less than 30 days, within 30 days. So we're not reneging on that. But in addition to that, the first tranche, the first round should be within just the first few days. We'll just call it less than a week. Make sense? We have a team of certified paralegals that are going to then draft the documents to remove the applicable negative items. So now we're digging into the details, because remember what we said, better credit just doesn't happen mysteriously. It's by removing negative and adding positive, right? We've discussed that. So here, as part of the onboarding, once we have the soft pull, because we need to look at the credit profile of the client and determine what's going on with it. And so we get that through the onboarding. Then our team of paralegals can draft and start removing. Now, this is not credit repair. Technically, it's not credit repair. We're not disputing items, so don't mistake it for credit repair. This is a more sophisticated approach. And then 3D, we'll start adding positive trade lines. Well, why would we want to add positive trade lines? Well, we've agreed a couple times. What's the formula to better credit? It's removing negative and adding positive. And also, we're promising them at least 100,000. Well, you don't get 100,000 without adding trade lines, right? Because what is a trade line? What is it that what's the process? Well, you apply for credit, you get approved for credit, you get extended credit, you use credit, and then it reports. So that's the process. So number 4, by improving the credit profile of the client, we'll get them qualified for a minimum of $100,000 within 30 days. So this is the revised implementation process. From your perspective, I want you to understand it so you can ask questions and be able to reply to clients' questions if they have them. But your role is steps 1 and 2. And then our role is 3 and 4. All right, Alfred's asking a question, and it's an important one. So he's asking, can he do step 2A? And I would say no, because if you go to your replicated website, so sure, you would know, Alfred, you would know the person's name probably, and their phone and their email. But if you put that in there to submit it, it's going to then take you, in that case, you to the next step. Well, the next step is to agree to the terms and conditions. Unless you have a power of attorney for your client, you should not be agreeing to terms and conditions for your client. That would be bad. So I would much rather you, Alfred, or any of our other distribution partners don't put their lead information in. Don't do it, because you know what's happening next. It's prompting them to agree to the terms and conditions. There's no benefit of doing this. Now, Alfred's following up, and his point's true. If someone puts in their lead information, but doesn't agree to the terms and conditions, yes, we have some follow-up automation that will follow up with them and prompt them, but that is not a good reason to breach the process. So no, you as a referral partner should not put in their information. They need to put it in. If they don't care enough to put their information in, then they're not really a good prospect. You've done something wrong. Maybe go back and have them watch the 5-minute video, but it is certainly not advisable for you just to go in and dump a bunch of people in on your web form, because again, that doesn't do anything unless they complete the second step. And if you're the one doing step 1, then they're not even around to do step 2. So let's not do that. All right, so let's get to our conclusion, and then we'll open it up for Q&A and see what your feedback is. The credit and funding program is legal, legitimate, and effective resource to help clients improve credit and access funding rapidly. Now we're guaranteeing them at least $100,000 in 30 days. For you, it's great. You're going to earn the $100 up front, plus you get 3% of the client's capital raised by following the simple process. Some of you are saying, well, how does the $100,000 primary trade line that we spent a lot of last week talking about, another page on your website? Sure. So it may very well be that they would be a good candidate for that $100,000 trade line. And frankly, we would know that after we've onboarded them, because we can take a look at their profile. I was working with a client yesterday, and I'm going to try to remember this accurately. The client had a decent credit score, but here were some of the mitigating factors. A number of the trade lines that were reporting were not the clients, they were AU, authorized user accounts. And so that doesn't help with funding. And then secondly, she really only had small trade lines. And so small trade lines are not as effective, not as powerful, not as credible in getting larger amounts of funding. And so, for instance, we talked to her and she signed up right away. It made sense for her to add the $100,000 primary trade line. So what's the point? You can go to the marketplace and lead with the $100,000 primary trade line if you would like, just like we talked about last week. Nothing has changed there. However, the primary trade line is a bit more of a sophisticated concept that not everyone understands what that means and how it benefits them. I think if you started with a credit and funding program, especially now that we have the guarantee within 30 days, and it's very simple to explain, right? We've talked about it. And how do you qualify people? It's this question. Are you interested in better credit and having at least $100,000 in 30 days or less? That's the qualification question. And then now you know the implementation process. The first 2 steps you do. The second 2 steps we do. So who has questions, comments, concerns? Let me make this just a bit smaller. So if you have individualized questions, you can reach out to us one-on-one. But who has questions on the slight revision, what I would consider an improvement, or the 4-step implementation process? And Terry's bringing up a point, and it's a good one. So on your replicated website, there's different resources. And so each of those resources has a bit of a different story to it as far as what it does and how it benefits, how it works. I was talking to Gail, one of our top consultants, this morning. She's on the Zoom now. And so anytime any of you, like Gail this morning, have a question, we always have to clarify, well, which program are you asking about? Because there's not simple answers to every program. Here we're talking about the credit and funding program. This is accurate. This is true. This is real. But that doesn't mean that all of these attributes are the same for other programs. of course. And that way, Gail and I joked about this morning. It's like if she and I went to a restaurant for lunch today, and she said, well, what's on the sandwich to the waiter? The waiter would have to say, well, which sandwich? The BLT, the hamburger, the Philly, right? So we have to be specific of which sandwich we're asking about or which program. Here, we're talking specifically about the credit and funding program. All right, so Alonzo has another question. So he's asking about he wants to know a little bit more about the credit portion, which we said is a combination of removing negative and adding positive. And we talked about that we'll do that down here in implementation. And so his question specifically is regarding 3C. And so those are permanent removals. Those are not temporary removals. So that's good to know. And then also when we add trade lines, those are permanent trade lines, not temporary. So I understand sometimes out in the marketplace, there'll be like a temporary removal or a temporary addition of a trade line where you better act real fast because the good things that's happened to the credit are temporary. That's not the case in our model. Okay, so I think that answers Alonzo's question or questions. Thank you for asking that. Who else has questions on what we've covered today? I believe that this will allow you to enroll a lot more clients. Why? A lot of people have less than optimal credit and they realize that impacts them. And so you and I can help them improve their credit legitimately by removing negative and adding positive, and they don't have to pay for that. It's part of the package, and that we guarantee results. Now, the pitfall of this, and I think it's what Eddie is hinting towards, different people want better credit for different reasons. Sometimes they're ready to go buy a home. Sometimes they want to go buy a car. Sometimes they want a business loan. Sometimes they want a student loan to go back to college. So people are typically motivated to improve their credit when they're ready to use it. So it's important that you create a wide net, because some people might benefit from this, but there's no urgency until they're ready to use their credit and it's not good enough. So certainly getting referrals from people that deal with credit declines is incredibly valuable. People that have applied for something and got declined. But in general, people tend to know about their credit, and it's very easy to qualify someone for this. Are you looking for better credit and at least $100,000 in 30 days? Who else has questions, comments, concerns? All right, so Susan's a bit hung up, and I understand, so let's dig back into it. So we're saying no upfront cost, no upfront expense. And we're saying that because people want to hear that, and we're able to deliver that. But again, use that car analogy. So there is a refundable setup fee that's due at the time of enrollment. That is an absolute fact. It's in writing. I'm sharing it with you. It's true. Do they have to pay that out of pocket? No, they can finance that. Just like the car example. When you go buy your next Mercedes G63 for $247,000, do you have to pay anything up front to drive that new G series off the Mercedes parking lot? You do not. You can finance it. And so in our world, financing is especially valuable, right? Not only because it keeps them from paying this out of pocket, but it's also fulfilling our promise to them. We said we'll help you get better credit. How does one get better credit? They get better credit by removing negative and adding positive. So we're helping them add a new positive trade line. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Make sense? All right, Alonzo has a follow-up question. Do people have to have a business to do this? No, the credit and funding can be ran just as an individual. Our bread and butter has been helping entrepreneurs, but that is not a requirement. The only prerequisites are right here. Thank you, Alonzo, for that. All right. So Eddie brings up a good point that we'll close on. So there is the cost of the program. And that I'm sharing with you in writing, I'm sharing it with you verbally, and of course, it's on your website on the credit and funding page as they go through and they accept the terms and conditions. It's very transparent. The cost of our program, the cost of the credit and funding program, well, I should highlight it here. Credit and funding program has two costs to the client, two costs. Number one, there's a refundable setup fee that's due at the time of enrollment, but we can get financing for it, so they don't have to pay out of pocket. So that's a fact. And they also pay a 10% performance fee based upon the capital raised. And so they know that, it's communicated. And if we didn't do that, how in the world would we pay you 3%? Right? So there's no magic to this, nothing misleading either. So there's two triggers. Eddie's question is a good one, is that could there be other cost? Well, sure. So let's say that we go help them get $100,000 in less than 30 days. That's what we promised to do, and we'll do that. Do you think that some of those lenders might charge the client an interest rate? Probably so, because that's normal. I don't know what the interest rate will be. It'll be based upon the qualifications of the client. So it's true, Eddie and others, we can only explain what the cost of our program is, which is what? Two parts: refundable setup fee that doesn't have to be paid up front, can be financed, and secondly, a 10% performance fee paid after the fact of each round of capital. But that's not stating that they wouldn't have any other expenses. Not they wouldn't have other expenses to us, but I think that's what Eddie's question is, which is right. Yeah, they're probably going to have an interest expense. You normally don't go get $100,000 of funding or financing without paying interest, right? Because that's the way the economic model works. So it's important, of course, to be honest and transparent, but we have to be on the same page. You and I can only speak about the cost of the program. If they get offered a $100,000 10-year loan from Wells Fargo is probably going to charge them an interest rate. And that's not part of your and my burden, not part of our responsibility. But the $100,000 is now guaranteed within 30 days. And we don't know exactly which lender or lenders that will come from, so we can't tell them up front. It's not that we don't want to. We can't tell them, oh, you'll get $100,000 and it'll be 6.9% interest rate. We don't know. We don't know where it's going to come from. We've got to look at the client's mitigating circumstances and create a plan fast. So what you're going to see is some freaking emphasis on timing. We're going to assign a coordinator, a credit and funding coordinator, to every one of these participants starting today. And they'll work with their coordinator, and there's going to be frequent communication because we got to make sure that we deliver. We're on the hook, our butt's on the line to get them $100,000 in 30 days. All right, and the last question, and then we'll break. James asked, and good morning, James, thanks for joining us, the 10%. So the 10%, which is stated in the agreement, of course, is a performance fee off the capital raised. It's paid after they receive each tranche. So if, let's say that they receive 50,000 in 7 days, then we would invoice them, consistent with the agreement, a 10% performance fee after that first tranche. That allows us to pay you, and your state director gets an override on this, by the way, James, you may not know that. So you as a consultant are getting 3%, your state director is getting a 1-point override. So each time they get a tranche of funding, they are invoiced the performance fee. But they know it, you know it, we're clear. There's no secrets. All right, well, hopefully this is helpful. I would certainly encourage you to take what we discussed yesterday, which was some specific scripting, and this additional insight now that we have a performance guarantee for the client, not only in terms of the dollar amount, but in terms of the time frame. I think you're going to be very successful enrolling a good number of clients very, very quickly. So we'll see you back tomorrow morning. If you have questions, concerns, you know where to reach us, and have a great day. Thank you. Bye-bye.